Anthony, we're getting a lot of questions. People are asking if they're eligible for streamlined offshore disclosure.
Right, and there's some really good questions involved there, and I don't blame people for being confused whatsoever. Ultimately, when you're looking at a streamlined program, understand that it is something for people who don't have criminal exposure. Okay, if you have criminal exposure, or if you're worried about it, you might not want to use the streamlined program. However, there are some tricks you can do to figure out if you are a target that I can't get into right now. That's too long of a topic. But there's some ways to find out if you're actually under investigation. What you need to ask yourself, though, if to qualify, is basically were you willfully or non-willfully avoiding your worldwide taxing obligations? And willful is one of those legal terms of art that the IRS is using to describe someone's conduct. So when you're looking at the IRS and you're having people claim conduct is willful or non-willful, you have to understand that's a non-attorney who went to a little bit of a training to say what's willful and not willful, and that an attorney who's representing you might give a different answer and certify that you were non-willful. Willful means you intentionally did it. Or the other thing that's a little bit more confusing for people is the IRS has this new way of saying willfully blind, and actually there's a good reason for it. Willfully blind is when, because how do you prove someone really meant to avoid paying their worldwide tax liabilities? You're trying to prove a negative, very difficult. But what you can easier to prove is that somebody should have known it, was so obvious to them, they must have taken deliberate steps not to see it. And one of the analogies that we use here, one of our attorneys, Robert Hansen, came up with this. It's basically you're reading a murder mystery novel, and the page before, and I mean, you've read the whole thing, and they're about to say who did it, and you just stop reading before they say who did it, and you're saying, I don't know who did it. I have no idea who did it. And that's basically the same thing. So that's really the standard of willfully blindness. You should have known that. Now, we've seen examples of the IRS coming up with people, taking negligence, which is just that, well, you were a little bit reckless, but how did you know that was going to lead to this entire chain of events? And so your willfulness, this is really where you want a legal opinion on this. This is what attorneys do. CPA is can't give you legal advice like this, and can't properly advocate whether you were non-willful. And being non-willful is what we want, because non-willful then allows you to have a reduced penalty rate of 5% if you're living in the U.S. or 0% if you are an expat. And that is one qualification of whether you qualify for the domestic is the default. And then if you're out of the country for 330 days, then you will qualify for the foreign, which gets you a 0% penalty, much, much better. There's some other qualifications. That's just the general rule. Now, one of the big things that comes up all the time is the IRS has their blacklist of the bad boy banks who are helping Americans hide money. And all of these banks, most of them are in Switzerland, but not all of them. HSBC is not in Switzerland. They have entered. They basically entered into an agreement with the IRS, a non-criminal prosecution agreement against the bank. I don't know how they were going to imprison the bank, but sure, whatever. A part of that deal was that the banks would tell the IRS who their U.S.-based persons are, or who they think they are. And so now someone on that. So the default is that you are subject to a 50% penalty and you don't qualify for a streamlined OVDP. You have to pay that 50% penalty. That's not really how it works. That's what a lot of people think it is, mistakenly. The important thing to ask is, are you willful or non-willful? Your bank really has nothing to do with it, because we have plenty of people who were banking at these bad boy banks. And it's sort of an interesting dynamic where the banker is assuming the U.S. person is trying to evade taxes. The U.S. person has no idea that worldwide income is taxable, so they don't even mention the IRS. Well, no one's mentioning the IRS. The bankers are not mentioning the IRS because they think their client is trying to avoid the IRS. And the client isn't mentioning the IRS because they don't think it's relevant. And a lot, when you have inheritances too, the account holder has inherited the money. That is where they had no willfulness in their non-reporting. So that's the thing. You can actually qualify for the streamlined even if you're in one of these banks that is blacklisted and you think you might have to pay a 50% penalty and you have no choice but the OVDP. So that's really why it's important to get a legal opinion on whether you are willful or non-willful, and get more than one if you want.
All right. Thanks so much, Anthony. For more information on the streamlined offshore disclosure program, say that 10 times fast, you can visit IRSMedic.com and enter keyword streamlined. Don't forget to click below to like this video. You can leave a comment and we'll get back to you. And you can subscribe to our channel for more awesome tax info. Thanks for watching. IRSMedic, the law offices of Parent, and Win LLP. Real tax attorneys for tough tax problems.